So I have two presentations for the Unit 3 line drawings. This is just the first of those two. We'll start off with the upper limb arteries, and just keep in mind that as you draw this, you're actually mastering the deep vein pathway as well. The blood will just flow in reverse through those alternative deep veins. So by knowing the pathway by name for the arteries, you also know the pathway by name in reverse for the deep veins. So one line here becoming two lines if you want to draw along, of course. Okay. What this is telling you is as the artery travels through the arm from the thorax, it's going to be a single artery, single major artery, and then it splits into two halfway down at the elbow. So you have the first rib here as a landmark. You have the teres major as a landmark. Cubital fossa represented by a nice triangle, and the anatomical snuff box. So landmarks, rib 1, that's where S will change names to A. TM, teres major, that's where A will change names to B. And cubital fossa, that's where B will split into two arteries. And then you have the anatomical snuff box right at the back, right near the back of the thumb, between two tendons in the back of your thumb there. You know that the floor of that is the scaphoid bone. Well, what artery is located there? Okay, so those are some good landmarks that if you draw them out, we can relate the artery to them. So the upper limb arteries by name include subclavian, S, before the first rib. After the first rib, it's axillary, because now you're in the armpit. The armpit only lasts so long. The bottom of the armpit, you could say, is roughly teres major and latissimus, so like teres major is fine. We switch names to brachial. And then the brachial heads down to the elbow, the front of the elbow, of course, because this is a solid line. And you have the cubital fossa where it splits into a radial artery and an ulnar artery. Okay. If you follow those down, notice how the radial artery is the artery contained in the anatomical snuff box. And the ulnar artery continues also anteriorly, but does not go through the snuff box. Interestingly, radial artery, the R there, it could be dashed as it passes through the anatomical snuff box, but in the drawing it's so small that I didn't include that. But keep in mind the anatomical snuff box is technically on the posterior aspect of your hand. Ulnar artery will continue as the superficial palmar arterial arch. A little easier to write SPAA in my opinion. And then the radial artery will continue as the deep palmar arterial arch. A little easier to write DPAA. All right, next up we have a good drawing for the cubital fossa, that triangle. So let's just blow up the triangle now. And you can see later that we'll have a couple of muscular boundaries. But then I have three things inside of it. Easy to represent that with three lines. The color here, brown, red, and yellow. And then we have an arrow, okay? Because when we describe this, we want to use the acronym TAN. So from lateral to medial, notice the L and the M on the slides now. You can draw that into your drawing. From lateral to medial, it's T, A, and then N. The contents are the tendon T of biceps brachii. The A was the artery that we just drew, brachial artery, heading down into the cubital fossa before it branched. And then the median nerve that you would have drawn with your brachial plexus heading down the middle in an anterior fashion during its entire path. So median nerve was always a solid line in that brachial plexus drawing. Muscular boundaries, brachioradialis laterally, notice it's on the L side, and pronator teres medially, notice it's on the M side. And since we just finished upper limb arteries, it's appropriate to go through lower limb arteries. And again, technically the deep veins just in reverse. So we have a single artery. This one happens to go posterior. We'll talk about that. But a single artery, again, getting halfway down, in this case behind the knee, because your lower limb rotates more than the upper limb and during development. And then at that knee, look what happens. That single artery splits into two arteries. One dashed, one solid, but it still gives you a similar pattern to the upper limb. Landmarks, you'll have the inguinal ligament, ING there. You'll have the adductor hiatus, which is a muscle where a name change takes place, similar to what happened in the upper limb. You have the bottom of the tibia, and we have a square, because you guys can draw in Tom, Dick, and Harry. Three muscles in the deep posterior leg. Notice the dashed line is a dashed line because it's a posterior artery. Tom, Dick, and Harry also hung out behind the tibia. So, landmarks. ING was the inguinal ligament. AH was the adductor hiatus, and that's part of the adductor magnus muscle, a very large adductor. Fun fact, teres major of the upper limb, which was a landmark, is also a really good adductor. Side note. Tibia, that's the distal tibia. And then you have lower limb arteries. Okay? Lower limb arteries, you have the external iliac, EI. F is femoral, so where does the name change take place from external iliac to femoral? That is at the inguinal ligament. Blood's traveling down now. As that artery passes through the adductor hiatus, it goes from anterior to posterior, indicated now by a dashed line. We change the name, because you're behind the knee now, to popliteal. Popliteal splits to posterior tibial and anterior tibial. Notice the anterior tibial is going to go to the top of the foot, and the posterior tibial will go with Tom, Dick, and Harry to the bottom of the foot.